In India, increasingly we see China as the big threat. Is it, and how should we cope?
China is, without any question, the most important shift that has taken place in the geopolitical landscape. It is a country that is the most successful case of economic development in human history. I mean, the West industrialized at, roughly speaking, 2.5% per capita average over a long period of time. The United States averaged about 3%, which is why it became the richest country in the world. China has averaged, even taking into account the current slowdowns, about 9% a year for 40 years. This is unprecedented, and, in terms of moving people out of poverty, enormously commendable. But China is a very traditional country and a very traditional world power. So for those who are expecting China to rise the way that Japan or Germany did, remember how unusual those rises were. These are two countries utterly traumatized by their history in the 1930s, utterly defeated, and then utterly reconstructed along lines dictated and encouraged by the United States. So to imagine that China will rise and not want to have a political, military influence commensurate with that power, it would be to defy the laws of gravity. That is not going to happen. China is going to want more and more power and influence in its region. Whether it wants it globally is an interesting question. China is also a very different power from the United States or Britain. And this may be for better or worse. The United States and Britain have always had an idea of extending their influence by converting the locals to their cause. There's always been a sense that you could make the places that they have influence over more like them. So you go into Iraq and you say, we're going to make it a democracy. We're going to make it an open market economy. And this was the aspiration everywhere. And it comes, I think, out of a kind of high Protestant tradition in which you think, Christianity has this great universal proselytizing mission. The Chinese have no such conception of their world role. The Chinese do not believe that they could go into any country in the world and ever make it like China, because guess what? Those people are not Chinese. China has an ethno-nationalist conception of its world role. What it means for China to be great is not that the world becomes communist or quasi-communist or Chinese capitalist or anything like that. It means that you respect China. You kowtow to China, and I'm using the word advisedly because it comes from the Chinese tradition. So the question India has to ask itself is, does it want to kowtow to China? Does it want to become part, a satellite of an ever-expanding zone of Chinese influence? By the way, I'm not saying at this point anything about the Chinese are going to be aggressive, they're going to invade countries. That I don't know. The Chinese are in some ways too smart to do what Vladimir Putin did. But I do think there's no question that they expect extraordinary respect and deference, even obedience. And you only see the way that they deal with a country like Australia. Yeah. Where the 14 demands, or I can't remember, it was 10 or 14 demands that they made of Australia, included that Australian media should refrain from criticizing China. Australian think tanks should no longer publish studies that are critical of China's domestic policy on any issue. These are unusual, to say the least, demands for an outside country to make. And what was essentially the Chinese were saying is, the price of good economic relations with us is that we expect these kinds of things. Australia is a much richer country than India, so it would stand to reason that over time the Chinese will make those kinds of demands of India. I don't think India will accept them, but the question is then, if you're not going to accept them, how are you positioning yourself geopolitically to be able to withstand that, play that, take advantage of it, buy insurance, cushion yourself? Surely the answer is not that you're going to get 90% of your advanced weaponry from China's great satellite vassal state, Russia. That doesn't make any sense.